Representative Holcomb has another meeting that was really important, a funeral he had to attend, so he's not going to be with us today. So sort of keep him in your prayers. And I'm so glad to see everybody here. And would you say a few words of prayer?
I'll be glad to. Let's pray. Our Father, we just thank you for this time together. Thank you for bringing this group together. Just give us the wisdom and the understanding to make good decisions. We just thank you for this great state we live in and the many blessings that you bestow upon it each and every day. In Christ's name I pray. Thank you.
Well, I hope I can read. I went to pick my glasses up. I picked up my sunglasses. So I'll just play like I can see. So many representatives have had questions about the tier system. So we thought it, and being moved from different areas, and so we thought it was important to try. We don't know how to tell them how we really get these figures and everything, and these classifications. So we decided that maybe we just needed to find out so we could answer some of the many questions that we're getting from different counties and people, and so and understand how you really come up with these tier systems. I know it's a terrible, terrible thing to try to do. So first of all, I'd like to call the Department of Community Affairs. I think y'all know Commissioner Nunn, and I'm well front and center. Wherever you want to sit, I don't care. Wherever you're comfortable. No, wherever you're comfortable. Wherever you're comfortable.
Good deal. I handed out a presentation. The presentation is actually one that I shared with y'all in Elberton in 2017 and Moultrie in 2018, so I'm going to talk about that. You ready for that? Great. Okay. And then I'll update you with the 2023 data. I'm joined today, which I make fun of friend, by my Deputy Commissioner Rusty Haygood, who you know, and Ryan Evans, who is our Director of External Affairs. So please stop me if you want to drill in on specific questions, because I'm taking the broad mandate of help us understand how this works, and running from there. The first page, and again, this is 2018 data, but this is a map of the tier system. And as you know, Georgia has a tier system that was begun in the early 1990s, and it started out with focused on just 40 counties in the state, the poorest 40 counties in the state. It was expanded by 2000 to be a relative scale across the state to help focus, drive economic development and support investment, particularly in communities that we'll call. Of which there's 71 in the state, receive the highest level of job tax credit benefits and have the lowest threshold of jobs that are required to be created. Tier 2, which is the next 35 counties in the state, is kind of a lesser tier of benefits and a slightly higher threshold of jobs, so forth and so on. So let's talk about the rankings, because annually we as an agency, the Department of Community Affairs, rank all 159 counties in the state. This is a very easy process because in law you tell us exactly how to do that. It is codified in law, the data that we use, how we score, how we rank. So all we do is a simple math exercise. and that math exercise involves pulling data on unemployment, which is data from the Department of Labor, per capita income and poverty rate in the state. Those are equally ranked. Every county in the state is ranked based on those data. They are weighted 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and it pops out a list 1 through 159. I think that the point you made, which is one about changes in any relative weighting like that, anytime you do the math, there are bound to be some communities that are on the border or on the threshold between tier 1 and tier 2 that may move. So generally, we experience about 20 communities in the state every year that move from one tier to the other. Half of those would move up a tier, whether that's tier 1 to tier 2 or tier 2 to tier 3. About exactly half of those would move down a tier. That's a function of math. Now, every year we try to reach out to those communities, help those communities understand the impacts of this, and there are a few tools or guardrails that we have in place to help communities navigate that change. So you got a question?
I got a question.
Great.
I'm not questioning the representatives that wrote this bill. I think it was in 2000. When was it?
Well, it was iterative from 1990 up through probably the last changes were in the 08 time frame. So.
But it says that the U.S. Department of Labor.
Right.
Some of us question the way the U.S. Department of Labor really ranks unemployment, and they're different. Other people, like HUD, has a different ranking and everything. Yeah. And, I question the unemployment rate, and that's one thing I wanted to ask the people in Department of Labor, because they don't it doesn't tell who's not working. It's just the who's not asking for a job.
Well, and if they're here, that would be a good question for them.
Okay, so I just wanted to,
yeah.
so you just use that.
We use that. I think it's really important. Well, keep going.
And the next thing is, Family Connection has been working with us, and I'm sure y'all probably know, they're rolling out the kids count data today to really find out how much children we have in poverty. And I look at Baker County. Baker County is 7th in the state in poverty, in children's poverty, and they are 100% free and reduced lunches. So many of us feel like that you can really get a good tell if you have children in poverty. That's what we want to count on, because I'm real familiar with Baker County.
Right.
And I do not see how they could be in a tier 2, and that's what really brought me to this question.
Right. No, I understand that, and this is
and so we've got to look at different ways to really, that's one of the poorest counties in the state.
That's right.
And no industry.
Believe me, you and I have talked a lot about Baker County, and we check with the county commission chair on a regular basis about the data on Baker County. I think that there's one important caveat if we're going to talk about data that I think that is important to understand. This is a question that came up, and Jay Powell and I had some really detailed conversations about this from 2017 to 2018. In Elberton, he asked the question about, that's the exact same question you asked. Would free and reduced lunch be a better measure than unemployment? You tell us the data you want us to use, and we'll calculate it. All we're going to do is put it into so you tell us. The data that we use is available at the census tract level, and if you move on 2 sheets, two pages, you, the legislature, have put in place a subsystem, and this is why I used this presentation. After we do the ranking of 159 counties, we then look at every census tract in the state of Georgia, and where there are those communities that have, and I'll give you a great example. Greene County is a community that, when they were first ranked, was a tier 1 county in the state. Between 1995 and 2010, Greene County moved from Tier 1 to Tier 4 status. Some significant investment in that community. If you look at Greene County, it's a tale of the haves and have-nots. So they have 5 census tracts in the county. 3 of them have a well above state average area median income, which contributes to them being a Tier 4 county. But the northern 2 census tracts in and around Greensboro look and perform just like so many of the counties that we all love and work with all across the state. Those census tracts are designated as less developed census tracts and receive the exact same benefits as the Tier 1 community. So the data that you direct us to use is best if it is available at a census tract level, so that we can uphold this statutory objective, which is a permutation of the job tax credits, and that's called the less developed census tract. That free and reduced lunch data is not available on a census tract level. I don't have a list of all data that's available at the census tract level, but it could be a menu and y'all can just pick. Just tell us what data you want us to use and we'll use that to calculate the tiers. Every year, communities will still change when you do that ranking because, again, math.
Well, I think you could look at Baker County. It's another county of a have and has not.
That's right.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to understand the date and how it plays in timing. So I know the statute says not later than December 31st, but generally when do y'all do reclassifications every year?
So generally, we do reclassifications on or around December 31st. The last couple of years, the data that we used has been a little bit delayed, in part because of census, in part because of COVID. And so the last couple of years, I think it has been maybe the second week of January that we released.
Because that can matter too, right? Like if you were to look at certain time, like if you were to look at it in November versus January, that may put a county that's on the bubble. They may get they may roll off one way or the other.
We're using the latest available data when we rank that. And so I think that generally that is, I'm looking at Rusty.
Annualized data.
Yeah, I mean, that's annualized data, but generally all of that data becomes available in the October, November, December time period for the year before.
Okay, and then just a second question, Madam Chair, if I can.
Please go ahead.
How does, I know, when you're pitching projects to a local community, a lot of times you can look at the tier system and you can tell them what the credit's going to be if they were to come and locate. How does that impact a prospective economic development pitch if you reclassify in the middle of that pitch? Like if I've got a manufacturing facility that's looking at coming to Polk County and we're Tier 1, and then,
right.
December 31st happens and we're Tier 2 and they want to ink the deal in February, how does that work?
That's a great question, and I'm actually going to answer 3 that were embedded in that. So right before the chair asked her question, I was going to mention, if you as a economic developer in the state, or frankly you as a business in the state, and that's what I want to come back to, if you have plans that you are working on in, let's say, 2022, and the clock's about to roll over into 2023, and things and your tier changes, there is a mechanism in place, a letter of intent, that you can file with us before your tax filings for the next year are due, so March 15th. You can file that with us and preserve the prior year tier status.
Good.
So if you're in the middle of a deal, we're not going to penalize you. Now, the 2 things that I thought that I would add to, you brought up that this is a really important tool for economic developers because it's the basis, it's the fundamental basis for offers, local offers, state offers. The job tax credits are offered based on if you come to me and tell me you're going to create 1,000 jobs, it's very simple math. Are you in a Tier 1 county? 1,000 jobs times, I'm going to make you an offer. There's no cost to the state until you create those jobs. If you only create 800 jobs, you're only going to get 80% of the credit. The credit is a statutory credit that you claim based on the job creation. That same credit that is used by economic developers is available to every existing industry in the state. And so, Representative Dickey, you and I have talked a lot about this. This is a tool that is universally available to jobs creators in the state. It is not just for people moving into the state. It is not just for existing industry. It's for anybody who creates jobs, which is why I said if you're an existing industry or an economic developer recruiting someone in, you can preserve that prior year tier status if you're already in the midst of a deal.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, just one
Please go
housekeeping
ahead.
thing. I have some local folks watching at home, and they said they're having a hard time hearing at home. So I don't know if, David, if there's anything we can do about that. But that's all I have for right now, Madam Chair.
How's that?
Thank you.
I'm not.
We're working on it. I'm sorry.
That was
I
both
understand.
of them.
Is that a mic next to you right there? That's kind of bent down? Or is that just wire?
Just what?
Let's
They can
just
move
go-
around.
Actually, if you wouldn't mind just grabbing one of those witness mics over there, I apologize.
I'm gonna leave that and take this.
What's the number on it?
Number one.
Let's try that.
How's that? That sounds better to me.
We'll see.
I'm sorry.
It's fine.
Well, I tell you, I would like to see some of these tier ones get a 1,000 jobs, because I know down in Decatur County, and Decatur County now is listed as a 2, I think.
Well, if
And they got 400 jobs, and we were really excited. That's a big deal if you got a small county getting 400 jobs.
I've got exciting news for you that I have to look on my phone to
Okay.
pull up, because I thought about you the other day when we were doing
Decatur
this.
County. I said DeKalb County.
I know.
Decatur County. Excuse
We all
me.
knew who you were talking
You
about.
all knew what I was meant.
I knew who you were talking about.
Decatur.
So, in South Georgia,
Uh-huh.
which I'm going to define as Region 10 and Region 11. So that is your region and the Southwest Georgia region.
Okay.
It's about 35 counties. In the last 4 years, we have announced 9,119 jobs.
Well, have they been filled, though? We can't find
Well,
people to work.
That's like I said, the job tax credit is available only when you fill the job.
Because
right?
we've got a lot of local businesses that are struggling for employees.
Right. I was just keying off of your.
Yeah,
we want
okay.
1,000 jobs in South Georgia. We're working on that.
Okay. Representative Dickey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, while we're kind of on this, in the scheme of things of incentives, I know you're not with the Department of Economic Development, but you're certainly very, very
They don't have
involved.
anybody here. I'll represent.
But in the scheme of things, how important is this tax credit, and how used is it? I think along lines. I think a lot of small businesses don't take advantage of it when they create incremental, smaller amount of jobs. But how important? Can you expand on how it's used?
So I'm going to first talk from an economic development standpoint, and then I'm going to address your existing industry piece. The job tax credit is the foundation of our economic development success. It is the foundation of every single offer that is made by your local economic developer, because this is one of their only tools that is available. It is the foundation of every offer that the state makes, and I think we all know the success that we've experienced as a state. I would argue, not with my economic development hat on, but remember, before I came to the state, I ran an accounting firm. Right? Every accounting firm that works with business understands how this tool works and leverages that to the benefit of existing industry. I'll give you a great example down in Decatur County. A couple of years ago, their tier changed, right? The economic developers called me, and they were, just like they call you every time there's change. They were concerned. They were concerned not because the three industries that they went to talk to, because they had extended offers and that they wanted to preserve the credit, would be impacted, but because they had found out that there were 3 other industries in their community that leveraged these credits to expand jobs that they had not, advised on that. It's because the accounting industry, is also. So the state and local tax professionals that you work with are helping existing industry. But in terms of economic development, this is fundamental, and it is foundation to every offer.
Well, if you were a tier 1 county, and all of a sudden you've been switched to a tier county, and you an existing industry, could you still take advantage of the benefit that you were in a tier 1 and just didn't?
If you were, so this is Representative Kelly's question earlier. If you and I have a business and we have plans to expand, we're building a new facility. We are about to hire, another 25 people next year. The change in tier, is not going to prevent us from doing that. And a good local economic developer, a good accountant, our folks working to communicate with all of those communities who are experiencing change will help you to file that notice of intent. So I think if you're in the midst of some job creating activity that intends to leverage the tax credit, the answer is yes. Of course, you can benefit from preserving those lower tier credits.
Any more questions? Representative Kelly.
Talk to me about the timeline of that, Commissioner. So y'all announced the reclassification, say, January 15th. When do I have to get my notice of intent into you? Am I supposed to do it preemptive of, hey, you may reclassify us, and so I just want to put you on notice, or is there a 90-day, 120-day, 6 months? What is the timeline for when I need to get that notice of intent to you?
So, in years past, so first of all, we typically reclassify on or by December 31st. Okay, but okay, let's give us the January 15th. In years past, that was a shorter timeline, and several years ago, really based on some conversations that we had and some conversations that we had internally with our economic development colleagues, we extended that to 90 days, really to meet the tax filing deadline. So corporate tax is due March 15, and then personal tax or LLC is April 15, so we extended that to 90 days. So we start communicating with call it 20 communities, and really it's the ones that are going down a tier as opposed to up a tier that are concerned. So we start communicating with those as soon as these rankings come out. It's up to the economic development professionals, the local elected officials, folks like you, to help make sure all of it, everyone is aware. But they've got the 90 days to file that.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Dickey.
I've got another question, and really maybe for the committee, it's more news. Maybe has there ever been discussion, this sort of what if, of other criteria to base tier on? I know we have a lot of counties that maybe are not tier 1 but are tier 2 and 3 that are really have depopulated over the last century and are really looking for industry people to move there. Would that be something that I see in my middle Georgia area, Houston County is a tier 3. They're busting at the seams. That's your home county.
Absolutely, I know.
Busting at the seams to try to do roads and economic development is going great. But you just move over to Crawford County, where I'm from. It is a ghost town, no grocery store. Looking for industry, looking for people to move there, whether it's residential or commercial or whatever. But they're the same tier. I just don't. Something is missing in our criteria. I think is the same way with Chairman Houston down in that area. I think it might do us good to look at some other criteria to incentivize some business to move over a county or two, or to move to certain areas that really are seeking that industry or population and would benefit much more from it than some others. And I know it's very imperfect trying to do these things, but I'd love this committee to talk about and look at some other criteria.
I think that's a great suggestion. Representative Bentley.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. And my question was exactly as Chairman Dickey stated. That was my concern about the criteria. Because when I look at Talbot County, which I don't represent, which is very similar to Taylor, which I do represent, Taylor's Tier 1 and Talbot is a Tier 2. That was my concern about the criteria. So, but thank you for your presentation this morning. I look forward to learning more about these criteria and these tiers and how it impacts economic development.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
I know that was a question for the committee. My only comment to that would be, just tell us how you want us to rank this, and we'll rank it. Right? There's no perfect system. The vast majority of states, 42 or 43 have a similar job tax credit system. No two of them are the same. We're the best state in the nation in which to do business for 9 years in a row. This is the foundation for that. So I think it's an important tool. But tell us how you want us to rank them. We'll rank them, and and then we'll work with that.
Okay, and let me ask you one other question. What is the financial advantage for 1, 2, 3? How does that go?
This is where I'm going to phone a friend. I know that it skews from $750 a job in Tier 4 to $3,500 per job in Tier 1.
That's a big difference.
But so Tier 1, that is your poorest community, is $3,500 per job, and you have to create 2 jobs in order to claim the credit. Okay? Tier 2 is $2,500 per job, and you have to create at least 10 jobs to claim the credit. Tier 3 is $1,250 per job. You have to create at least 15 jobs to claim the credit. And Tier 4 is $750 per job, and you have to create at least 25 jobs to claim the credit.
Is there any rule about you change it with inflation? It just stays the same?
It stays the same.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're talking about comparison to other programs in other states, I mean we're never the outpacing others on our incentives. I'll tell you, just looking at 2 of our neighboring states, the state of Tennessee offers $4,500 per job across the board for all 4 of their tiers, and they also have 4 tiers. But they have a different number of jobs that have to be created in each. State of South Carolina has raised their Tier 1 benefits. They also have 4 tiers to $25,000 per job. That seems excessive, but hey, we're making hay with what we've got.
Maybe these counties that are losing population. Well, are there any other questions for Commissioner Nutt? All right, Representative Dick.
For you, Commissioner, we can talk offline, but I would love to connect with one of your team members that can share with me if they've been working with any counties in my district on tax credits for job creation.
I'm certain that they have, but I'm happy to connect you on that. And thank y'all all for, when I look around the room, all of you are great supporters of what we do and of job creation in your community. So I'm happy to follow up with you, Representative Bentley, and really just appreciate the time to be with y'all this morning.
Representative Calley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just when you mentioned, the state that gives us 25,000. Again, do we have any? I don't see any in the statute, but there's no consideration for the pay of these jobs.
Yes, there is, and there is a separate credit. It's called the Quality Jobs Tax Credit, which I won't go into in great detail. That actually incentivizes high-paying jobs, but there is a threshold on these jobs, and it is a very low threshold. But you have to pay above the prevailing median wage, average wage in the lowest county in the state. Over the last couple of years, that number has gone up fairly significantly, not surprising. I think when we talked about this back in 2017 or 18, that number was about $11 an hour. This year it's $15.80 per hour.
So if we started looking at inflationary trigger, that would be the thing to tie the inflationary trigger of the tax credit
to the wage base.
You're
So
right.
if you create, if you go and create jobs that, from y'all are in charge of public policy, but if you're creating jobs that are pulling down the community, we ought not to incentivize those, right? So that wage floor, which is what plays with the job tax credit, is established at the lowest.
I mean, just
average
because
wage
of
in the state.
inflation, if you said 4 years ago an $11 an hour job got a $3,500 a year credit, and now you're talking about it has to be a $15 an hour job getting a $3,500 credit, the credit has lost value over that period, correct? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
we'll be in touch, okay?
Appreciate it.
Do I have anybody here from the Department of Revenue? Okay. Does anybody have any questions for the Department of Revenue?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. I meant to say.
Thank you.
Uh,
Does the Department of Revenue or any other agency track the use of these tax credits, where what counties they're used in, or what areas of the state, actually the levels they're used in?
Yes, sir, we do. And in some instances, that is data that we can give out on an aggregate level. But if it is, let's say that an employer comes to X county and X county is very small and they are the only employer receiving the job tax credit in that county, we can't give out job tax credit data for that county because you can trace it back to that employer.
I understand. That's
And
the same
that
way
is-
with sales tax
yeah.
and that sort of thing. Can
Right.
you give this committee a report that we could use?
Yes, we can. And I'll also add to Commissioner Nunn's presentation in that in Tier 1 and Tier 2 counties, these credits can be used against 100% of tax liability, whereas in Tier 3 and Tier 4, it can be used against 50%. And then in Tier 1 counties, it can be used against withholding as well, the job tax credit.
Could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
So in Tier 1 counties, the job tax credit can be used against 100% of tax liability and against withholding. In Tier 2 counties, it can be used against 100% of tax liability. In Tier 3 and Tier 4, it can be used against 50% of your tax liability.
Okay.
And if I might add one
Yeah.
thing.
Go to the mic, if you will. That's fine.
We'll do this as a tag team. I'm always happy to help out a friend. I think the question about general usage, as you said, this is protected data. This is administered by DOR. I don't have the latest data, but when we have looked at this across the state in aggregate in the past, certainly this is 159 counties, and it's the basis for all of our economic development success. It is used all across the state. I think that there are fewer than, maybe 10 or 12 counties that over any rolling 5-year period of time don't claim job tax credits. Widely used. About 70% of the state's population is in the northern half of the state. They only claim typically between 55 and 60% of the credits. So I think that this, when you skew based on population, this actually benefits, some of the rural parts of the state. I talked about regions 10 and 11, southern and southwest Georgia. Typically they claim probably 5 to 6% more job tax credits than their representative portion of the population. So, this is not 100% of the job tax credits are claimed in Tier 1 counties. You wouldn't expect that. That's not where all your job creation, but it skews to the benefit of our rural communities, at least in the latest data that we were able to talk about on an aggregated level. So I think that was kind of the crux of your question.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
Representative Kelly, did you have a question?
No, ma'am, I think I was just
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Absolutely.
Is there anybody here with the Department of Labor? Good. Good to see you. Nice to have you here. You want to introduce yourself?
Yes, ma'am. I'm Louis DeBrew. I'm the new Chief of Staff for Labor Commissioner Bruce Thompson. And I've asked Mark Watson, our Director of LMI, to be here this morning since he knows far more about this than I will ever know.
Well, thank you, and thanks for the handout. I think you probably heard me say that I didn't really approve of the way the federal government did the Department of Labor unemployment.
Well, that's what we're here to talk about.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I was listening, and that's a lot of interesting information, and I was taking some notes on some of the things you were talking about. And so it looks to me in this in the tier system, what if I recall the information correctly, use of the unemployment rate, the per capita income, and the poverty rate is how these tiers are derived. So I was just making note, just thinking of what else could possibly be used. The interesting thing about our state, other than Texas, I believe we have the largest number of counties of any other state. If we were like Iowa, we would probably have about 8 or 10 counties and be a little bit easier to calculate and do things like this. But let me get into the handout. In our conversation, in the conversation we had with Lewis about us coming over here, I wanted to just go over some general information about just how the unemployment rate is actually calculated, because a lot of people may not clearly understand how that works. In its simplest definition, the calculation of the unemployment rate is simply the number of unemployed divided into the civilian labor force. So that's the simple definition. But as you alluded to on the call with Lewis, because I was in the room, you are leaving out those who are disconnected to the labor force, those who are not looking for a job, those who are not filing an unemployment insurance claim. They're kind of in the estimates, they're really not accounted for, because we mentioned the U tables, and I gave you a little bit of information on the U tables. The official U table that the U.S. Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics utilizes, and if you look on the very last page, table A15 of the latest data, you'll see that the U3 table is simply the total unemployed as a percent of the labor force, and that is the official unemployment rate. If we look down at the U6 table, that considers the total unemployed. You also have persons that are marginally attached to the labor force, those who are working part-time but would rather work full-time, but due to economic reasons they are having to take a part-time job. That's usually where you'll find the largest calculated unemployment rate, because it's accounting for just about everyone that they can track in terms of producing estimates and whatnot. So I wanted to clarify that a little bit.
I have a question. So why, when you see it in the paper, they'll say the unemployment rate, I'm looking at this, on a U6, the unemployment rate is 6.7, but U1, it's 1.3.
Mm-hmm.
But why do we not say it's 6.7, which has the true unemployment?
Well, because the Bureau of Labor Statistics definition, and they are the official curator of the official labor force estimates, unemployment rate, what have you, deem U3 as the official release number.
All right, let me ask you another question. If we wanted to use the U6 number, could we, would you have it by counties?
I would not have that by county, because we do not produce the data. It's actually produced by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they do not get granular down to the county level.
Okay. So we really don't have a true picture of the unemployment per county.
In terms of
Real life.
marginally attached, not attached. We had this conversation. I had this conversation with Commissioner Thurman. So, since how long I've been with the Labor Department, I'll go back to Al Scott. But we talked about this about Mark. These people we see on the sidewalks, on the side of the street, they're not counted in our numbers. No, they are not. And so it's acknowledged that that is an issue in terms of how the Bureau of Labor Statistics accounts for an unemployment rate. That's why, as you brought up previously, looking for perhaps other alternatives, to go along with unemployment rate, per capita income, poverty rates. One thing I thought about, because I've been doing a lot of research in terms of areas of the state, and absolutely, Southwest Georgia and the Southern Georgia area, they're going to have the lowest educational attainment. They're going to have the lowest per capita income, household income. I think educational attainment's an interesting data point. A couple of other things I look at is the what's called the labor force participation rate, which takes a look at the number in the labor force compared to that population in that area. In listening to the dynamic of what this committee is all about and what you're looking to do, that seems like an interesting measure. I also like to look at the employment to population ratio, which looks at the number of employed compared to the entire population age 16 and above, work age. Mm-hmm. I always find commuting patterns to be interesting too, looking at, when you're trying to bring industry into your area, you want to know, okay, well, the people who are living in this area, are they staying at home? Are they working in this county? Are they going out somewhere else? If they are, where are they going? How far are they willing to travel? And those are just some notes I made in listening previously, just a few measures that I know the data, it will not get down to the census tract level. Census tracts are limited because that is very granular data, and we got to remember we're basing this on estimates. The only true measure would be initial claims filed. But then that would perhaps penalize a smaller area like Baker, who has a very small labor force to begin with. So, of course, their claims filing is going to be lower than Fulton County, for instance. Mm-hmm. So that's really not a fair way to look at things. More questions?
Well, Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being with us. Would you say that one of the 6 classifications, is there a better true accuracy number with one of the classifications than another? Meaning, do any of them require a greater extrapolation than another?
Yes, so they do. I believe it's one reason that you probably do not see a U6 calculation at the county level, particularly, think about how, again, small some of our counties are in terms of population or labor force. Again, we're working on estimates, and when you work on estimates, the more granular you get and the more inclusive you try to be with data, the larger your standard deviation and margin for error is going to be. So that is more than likely, in my years, that's why the U3 table is just considered the official measure. It takes some of that noise out and is just, from the perspective of those who make that call, decidedly a number that provides less margin for error than going down to a U4, U5, or U6.
Would you say U1 would be the probably most accurate, requires less extrapolation, and as you go down to U6, it probably requires the most speculation, and so somebody in Washington said, well, let's just pick one in the middle, and at 3 it'll look lower than 4, and they chose on 3?
That's a good perspective. The looking at the number of employed 15 weeks or longer as a percent of the labor force, In order to do that, you're tracking initial claims data. You're literally saying, okay, this Social Security number that filed has been unemployed for 14 weeks. So that's a real number, but again, it's only giving you one small measure, and I do think that wouldn't be enough. And again, that's going to give you your smallest number. That's going to condense your areas. And that's another thing I wanted to bring up. Our unemployment rate right now is at a historical low, particularly for 9 straight months. We've sat at 3.1%. And, you've probably heard, in your years of doing your work, well, if you're around 5%, you're almost at full employment. I don't agree with that, but, that's what's said a lot. And so when you have a low unemployment rate for the state, that's going to tighten all the areas. You're not going to have as big a diversity. I think right now Clay County, has the highest unemployment rate at 9 something. And then you've got, I live in Forsyth, I think Oconee and Forsyth typically have very low unemployment rates. So when you're in the Great Recession or you're in a pandemic, you're going to see a range of unemployment rates from, let's say 5% up to 20%. In a situation we're at now where we're seeing all-time lows in terms of claims filed, benefit payments that we're paying out right now. 2022, we hit all-time lows looking back to the mid-70s in the data series I have. So with a lower unemployment rate, everybody's unemployment rate at a county level is just closer together. And then, you're going to see, when somebody's fallen from a tier 1 to a tier 2, they're still going to, see other measures. Maybe, their per capita income's not going to change that much from year to year. The poverty rates can, but when you have some kind of economic situation occur, your unemployment rates are going to, move right along with that, because technically an unemployment rate is a trailing indicator. So once you see something happening in the economy, you see inflation or what have you, job loss, then right along with that, a month or two later, you're going to see unemployment rates go up. So.
Answer my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You've done such a good job. We'll probably call you back.
It's quite all right. Hey, look, we do a lot of work with our data. We love the fact that people are looking at it and want to know about it.
Well,
So you ask us anytime.
All right. Thank you so much for coming.
All right.
And looking forward to working with you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Are there any other questions or comments? Well, thank you. I think we've got a lot of stuff to think about and a lot of stuff to work on. But thank y'all so much for coming. And if y'all have any suggestions, any questions from the audience, we'll be glad to answer if we can.
And Madam Chair, I just want to thank DCA and Department of Revenue for always being so accessible to help me reside in rural Georgia, in my rural communities. There's always a great deal of work, and I really appreciate your help in helping me serve my constituents better. So thank you.
Thank y'all so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.